Okay, in today's example, what we're going to do is we're going to look at cleaning data. And this is an important thing, especially when we're dealing with any kind of analytical data. We have to get it into a form that we can use because sometimes we'll get stuff that's stitched together from multiple databases. Sometimes there may be values missing. As you can see from some of the examples that we did in Chapter 3, especially that golfing example, there were some calculations that could not be made if we had blanks. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to go through and clean up this messy set of data. Now we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, just enough so you guys have some of the basics for doing it because it is a statistics class. It's not really a data cleaning one, but we'll be doing it a lot, and especially for your final project, that data is a mess, you are going to have to do some data cleaning. So basically what we have here is this is a bunch of data from a tech company out in Silicon Valley about workers that they've hired. This information was sent to Dr. Jackson, and so this is a real database of data. In fact, it looks like they did some kind of database switch in here because once we get around employee 168, we have different kinds of ways the years are gone. We can see that we're using different measures for locating out bachelor's, master's degrees, and whatnot. So we're going to need to clean this up because we can see there's some blanks in here. These things are named incorrectly, and we'll talk about each column as we go. So the first thing that I do want to say is any time that you are working with data, this set of data that we have right here, in the scientific world, we would call this our raw data. This is the data that we've been given. You never, ever, ever work with your raw data. Always make a copy of it. So in this case, we've got this on Sakai. If this was the actual data I was using for research or some kind of other thing, I would always have this data, and then I would make a copy of the workbook and only work in that copy. So let's start taking a look and seeing if there's anything unusual in this data. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to come here. I'm going to highlight that stuff, go to Data. I'm going to hit my filters. And the reason I do that is it's going to quickly allow me to take a look at what's going on. So if I click on this ID one, I look at it. It looks like it's just the ID number of the employee or the transaction. Doesn't say there's no weird things here. There doesn't seem to be anything with blanks or whatnot. So we're probably pretty good with that data. And I go look at start date. I can see as I go down through, it looks like they made a switch from just the years, which are actually broken up into the different months, going to fiscal years. And so we're going to have to do something about that. And there's blanks in there. We'll have to take care of that too. Look at universities. Now, as I go through here and look, well, we can see that there's a lot of different formats for the way it's put together. In fact, we can look here, Colorado State University. We have Colorado spelled incorrectly twice, spelled correctly once, and here's Colorado State University, Fort Collins. So we have multiple different Georgia Tech USA, multiple different ways that the same thing is stated, so we'll need to clean that up. Now, here's my alma mater, RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology. Those are actually both the same university, so we'll end up having to clean that up. Degrees, we can see that they're all kind of over the place. Some say bachelor's, some list them out, some say I have a doctorate of philosophy, I also got a PhD, so I'll have to clean that up. Majors are all over the place, some 2-digit codes, some spelled out. There may be some minors in here, I don't know. Go look at GPA, that's looking pretty good, except we've got dashes and blanks here, so we'll have to clean that up. And beginning grade. We've got some numbers, and then we have some codes. So there are definitely some issues with its data, and we are going to, let's say we're going to run an analysis set on that, we are going to need to clean that up. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this all here. This is the quote-unquote dirty data. And so we're going to control, and I'll come over here. We're going to be inserting some columns here. So let's maybe go out to N, and I'm just going to paste them down. In fact, I'm just going to grab all of that stuff, Control C. Do I want to duplicate? No, we'll duplicate it as we go. Okay, so let's just get started going into it. So first of all, we went through and went, okay, well, you know what? This ID column is fine. I'm just going to Control C. I'm going to bring the ID data over completely because that looked okay. Now what we have is, if we go back here and look at this again, we're like, oh, there's some blank values in it. So we could come here and say sort highest to lowest, and we can see there's a 16. Actually go low to high. I was expecting the blanks to show up at the top. And so we'll run down here to the bottom. So we have these blanks. Now, there's not a lot of blanks here. We could just fix this by going and doing each one individually without writing a function. So if we were going to do that, I would just leave it in its default mode. Let's go back here and actually we're going to undo that because we didn't want to sort that. So let's go just undo a couple steps. Okay, I undid until the ID column was there, so we'll put that back. We have that blank there. What I really should have done is gone here and just searched by the blanks. The problem is once I reorganized it, it moved the blanks out of the area that they were, and I'm going to want them there. And I'll explain why here in a second. So here we go. Here's all of our IDs and where they're going. So we've only got a couple. So how do you fix something like that? Well, you've got a couple different ways. One way would just be to, since this is a sequential string, would just be to take the previous day and just copy it down. And if you're going to do that, you would do that on all of them. Or you could take the next day and copy it backwards, and you could just do that with all of them. If this was a set of number data, you could maybe take the average between the two of them. But I don't want to do it by hand. I want to automate it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an if statement. And I'm going to say if. And so it's a logical test. And so I'm going to say if, I'm going to try B2 equals 0. Because if it's blank, it should be 0. If that doesn't work, we'll change it and we'll go to a different string. But does that equal 0? If it does equal 0, what I want it to do is I want it to grab the value before it. So in this case, we're using the start date, but as we drag that down, since that'll drag down with it, we'll see, because we're going to pay attention to 31 here. We'll come back to it. So if it is 0, we'll take the one above it. If not, we're just going to take that one there. So it's the regular value. So this one should be 1/4/2010. And it goes to a number default. So that's fine. We're going to go into our home, change it from number, and we're going to change that to date. And there we go. Now, since I formatted this one and we're going to drag it down, they will all be date. Okay, so we're going to double click on that one, and oh no, we've got those hash signs. What does that mean? That just means that it's too long for the cell. So we'll make the cell a little bit longer. So let's go down here to 31. Okay, and since it was 0 here, what it did is it went and just grabbed this date up here and filled it in. And so let's go to this one here. So 60. So ID 60 is listed as 13. So all that statement did is went, okay, well, if this is 0, if it's blank, grab this one here. Great. Quick statement. Once again, you could have just gone down and copy and pasted it because it was a couple, but I like automating things because I never know when I'm going to use this code again. Okay, so that is the start date. At least that filled in all the blanks. Now we still have a problem because even though it filled in all the blanks, we still have this fiscal year divide between the regular one and there. So we're going to need to fill that in because we're going to want everything in the same format. And I could convert all these to fiscal years, but since I do have some of the starting dates here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a table and convert the numerical dates, or excuse me, the fiscal year dates to numerical dates. And as I look through here, I can just see that with the data, most of the higher dates are around 6, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there. And we've got some at 3 or 4. I'm just going to make an assumption, and I'm going to assume that these companies' fiscal years are going to start on the 1st of January. Could be a bad assumption. Could be a good one. I could come back later and they could say, hey, our fiscal year actually starts in March. But I'm going to set this up in such a way that if that's the case, it's going to come back and we're going to be able to just adjust a table quickly and everything will update on its own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these columns in here that I left, and I'm going to make a bunch of conversion tables. In fact, I'm going to label these conversion tables. I didn't spell tables right, did I? No, I did not. So these will be our conversion tables. We're going to be using a couple of them. Actually, let me home. I want it to go that way. So our first conversion table is going to be about our fiscal years. So if we go down and look, we'll see that our fiscal years start at 10 and they run to 16. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do fiscal year 10, keep it in the same format, and then I'm going to drag this down to 16. Since there's a number there, when I drag, Excel goes, oh, you want to drag? You want to roll those numbers? We can do that. And so I'm going to convert those to 7, 1, 2010. And I'm just going to drag those down to 7, 1, 2016. And see, it's doing it by date because it just thinks I want to roll up one date. So the trick for that is, so now I'll do 7, 1, 2011. And now if I go and grab that, you can see Excel goes, oh, you want me to roll years and not days. So it kind of figures out what's going on. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is, I only want to leave one space between the data, so I'll get rid of these. And actually, because this over here is going to be all my clean data, I'm going to come over here and go cut. And I'm just going to insert that column right in there. And start date, and we'll just call it clean 1. And so basically then when I go over here, this will be my final cleaned data. So we'll just scroll that in. You know what? Yeah, we'll just leave it like that. We could word wrap it and make it a little bit taller, but for what we're doing, it's not going to matter. I'm going to shrink this one a little bit too. Okay, so what I need to do though, copy, and I'm going to insert a copied cell there. I'm going to shift all my cells to the right, kind of boop, move everything over so I can take a look at what's going on. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I want to convert all of these clean dates into my start date. I want to filter it through this conversion table. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use a VLOOKUP function. And so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, okay, let's go here, equals VLOOKUP. And you can read from the description, looks up for a value in a table. And so what it's going to be looking for is the value is going to be in the leftmost part of the column, and then we'll specify what's going on. So I hit tab, the lookup value, what I want to look up, and I want to grab this date from the cleaned table. The table that I want it to look up in is this table here. I'm highlighting the entire thing. Since I do not have a range name on it, I'm going to hit F4 to put my dollar signs in. It's going to ask for what column index number. This is column 1, so if I put 1 in, it's just going to return that same thing, but I'm going to use column 2 because I want to return it from this column here. I'm going to close the parentheses, I'm going to hit it, I'm going to populate this all the way down, and we're going to notice that we got that not applicable error, that NA, until we get down here to our places where we have the fiscal year. Once again, we're not getting the date, so what I want to do is I'm going to come back up to this first one. I'm going to go home, I'm going to go into my number, and then I'm just going to come down here, date, and I'll pick my date there. So now it's a date, and I drop that down. We should get down here, and now everything's 7/1/13, 7/14. But we have this problem up here. How are we going to solve that? We'll take care of that in part 2.